Let's review our lesson for today. Today we are in our spring quarter dealing with justice and the prophets. We are in unit number 3, called to God's work of justice. And today we're looking at lesson 13 for May 24th, 2020, entitled Do the Right Thing. And our text comes from Jeremiah, the 22nd chapter, verse 1 through 10. Today we return to the book of Jeremiah, but we are in the 22nd chapter. And Jeremiah again stands as the last warning and alarm sound for God's people. After having been put in the prison and then the pit, God again in our text today calls for Jeremiah to go again to the king and preach this same message of justice. We find this message in verse 1 through 5, where Jeremiah is to preach that we ought to execute justice and righteousness, that is, to do what is just and right, that we are delivered from the hand of the oppressor, that we are to do no wrong or violence and not shed innocent blood, that we are to think about the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. And here is the conclusion. God says, if you obey, if you do this, you will inhabit the land. But if you disobey, then the land will be desolate. And God in his infinite wisdom already knows that Israel is not going to do what is right. So God in verse 6 through 10 tells the king and the spiritual leaders who are to do right but refuse to do it. He says to them, Jerusalem is beautiful. It may be as beautiful as the snow-covered summit mountains that are found in Lebanon, and it may be as fertile as the grasslands in Gilead. But God says, I'm going to turn Jerusalem into a desolate place. I'm going to turn it into a wasteland where the cities will not even be able to be inhabited in. God says, I'm going to do this because I'm going to send a destroyer, and I'm going to take the wood from your houses and your buildings and your palaces, and even in the beautiful house of God that you have built. The destroyer is going to come in and take that wood and burn it and destroy it. And this is what happens to Jerusalem and God's people. In fact, God said people are going to walk by and ask, why did God do such a thing to this city? Why did God allow such a thing to happen? And the answer is going to be because they forsook the Lord and did not keep his commandments nor his covenant. Well, I pray today that the church hears this same message, because God is calling us to do what is right. If we refuse, God's judgment is going to take place even in the house of worship. If I hear the words say that judgment will start in the house of the Lord. So it's important for each of us to hear God's warning that he is calling us to do what is right, calling us to do what is just. He's calling us to help those who are oppressed. He's calling us to remember the foreigner, the home of the widows, the fatherless, the motherless. He is calling us to do what is right in his eyesight. But if we fail, and if we refuse to, doesn't matter what place or position we have, whether it's Jerusalem, whether we are the chosen people of God, God's judgment will come. And some may say, as I'm going through, how long is it going to take God's judgment? Well, this is the question that they asked Peter. Peter had to address in 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter, because people were asking, how long before the Lord returns? And Peter had to encourage them that the Lord is long-suffering. He's not slack concerning his promises. He's just long-suffering, that he would have all come to repentance and none would perish. So if God seemed to be delayed, it's only because he's given an opportunity for people to get right. Do you hear the alarm? Do you hear the sound? It's God's calling for all of us, especially in his house, calling his people to do the right thing.